Views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olson.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of After Hours AM, and we are back. That's right. You know what, Eric? I got to say this because guess who died recently?
Who died recently?
Roddy Piper. Remember him?
I do.
Well, anyhow, I'm Joel Sturgis. That's Eric Olson, the incomparable Eric Olson. But we're here to tell you, we're here to do two things. Chew bubblegum and kick ass. And we're fresh out of bubblegum.
We are back. I can assure you, my friends out there in Radio Land, we had no intention of disappearing.
No. Gosh,
for
no.
2 months plus.
No.
It's hard to believe. But we have had if you wrote a movie about our personal and professional trials and tribulations over the last 2 months, no one would believe it. Come on! Give us something we can believe. It has just been one bizarre, maniacal thing after another.
I feel like I'm in a bad Ed Wood movie. Remember Ed Wood?
House of Mirrors, because distorted. Reality is so distorted.
It's crazy, man.
And bizarre. It really is weird. On the other hand, if we kind of got some or most, it's never all, we got most of this stuff out of the way in that relatively compact period of time, then that will be a good thing.
I would have to agree. You know what's weird, though? Other than our personal lives and professional lives the last 2 months of being in turmoil, and I thank everybody for caring enough about us to reach out and say, hey, where'd you guys go? And thank you to all of our all of our affiliates that had enough patience with us to be like, hey, you know what? Just do your thing. We'll be here waiting for you. Again, I'd like to thank Dark Matter. I'd like to thank 105 or 105.5 FM down in Louisiana. They have been United Public Radio. They have been patiently waiting for us to come back to the airwaves along with other affiliates too numerous to mention. I would like to thank you guys again from the bottom of our hearts for sticking with After Hours AM. But we are back, and another thing that's really bizarre, and I got to get this off my chest right now. Have you seen the court pictures of Tom Brady?
Yes. I tweeted about that actually yesterday. He looks like a zombie.
Doesn't he? I mean,
he looks like a monster. I guess the court artist was taken aback by the reaction. Of course, that's social media in
he looks like a bad Picasso photo, man. He looks like a bad Picasso.
It is not flattering. He looks like a zombie who died at 70.
That is so true. It could be
not
worse.
in a good way.
It could be worse. It could be the guy right next to him.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd be even mad.
Is not known, this artist, for his flattering portraiture. He's not the guy at the amusement park who makes everyone look good with the big head and the smiley face.
No,
and
he's
the
not that guy.
Eyes. This is the guy who makes everyone look like a freaking zombie.
I know, he looks like he should be. It looks like he just freshly came from The Walking Dead. I'm here for court.
It's hilarious. It really, really is. Because let's face it, Tom Brady is a good-looking guy.
Yeah, he's GQ kind of guy.
Kind of two ways about it, and he doesn't look 70. He draws the supermodels. He loves them and leaves them. Those supermodels. Once they get pregnant, he dumps them.
And a lot of this is jealousy of Tom Brady. I know there's a lot of haters and a lot of lovers, but dude, wouldn't you, in some small way, trade your life for his if you could? Just in a small way. Not that you don't love your wife or your kids. I'm just saying.
Well, categorically, let's take it by category.
Sure.
Do I wish that I was a world-class athlete at the absolute top of my game and a certain Hall of Famer? Yes.
Absolutely.
I do. Do I wish I was, I don't know, I think he's probably, what is he, 6'4", maybe?
Yeah, he's my age.
I wish I was 3 or so inches taller and 50 pounds heavier with no fat? Yes.
Wouldn't that be great? I mean, the guy has it all, and I think that's why he
has it all.
I think that's why a lot of people hate him. But, this whole Deflategate, it's starting to draw on a little much now.
Oh, it's retarded. On the one hand, it certainly looks like something untoward happened. I mean, stuff like that doesn't just happen, let's face it. And apparently, it would appear he was aware of it. No way around that. On the other hand, apparently in court, I didn't really hear about what happened today. If anything, I don't even know if they were in today. But yesterday, when the picture went viral, apparently that judge was very skeptical of aspects of the NFL's case. So we'll see. I mean, look, his suspension, that's a fairly serious thing. It is not a slap on the wrist.
That'd be like benching Babe Ruth.
It is. It is. I'll be interested to hear what the judge ends up, how he ends up adjudicating. You got to remember, I mean, there's always two sides, and usually more than two, but there's always two sides to these things. And it would certainly appear that one or more people representing the Patriots, tampered with the balls. So that's one side of it.
Well, no one likes their balls tampered with. I'm telling you that much now.
Without permission. Do not tamper with my balls without permission.
And especially don't deflate them.
God, who wants that? But I mean, the other side of it is the NFL is so self-righteous and so pompous and so absorbed up its own sphincter that, that's the other side of it as well. So, we'll see. I'll be interested to see, like I said, kind of what a real court, not the court of the NFL, thinks about the evidence and thinks about what happened. I mean, you've got a bunch of absolute, completely self-absorbed, multi-millionaires against the billionaires. Here, is really what it comes down to.
I am surprised.
And there's just no one really to side with. They're all jerks.
I'm surprised that the egos could fit in the room.
It's stunning. And you know what? I'm wondering if the caricaturist or the artist, I'm wondering if that subconsciously perhaps entered into his thinking. That guy is such a smug, has it all. I'm going to make him look like a 70-year-old zombie.
Take that, Tom Brady.
In your face, Tom Brady, who has it all.
Exactly, while the guy that's doing the artistry makes $30,000 a year. You know what I
I
mean?
don't know what they
Struggling
make.
to make
everyone
ends
who
meet.
walks into a courtroom makes good money.
Well, yeah, maybe this art, but look how bad he is. If they pay him by quality, he is so screwed. He's so done for.
But he is not the flatterer, as we
No,
mentioned.
that's true. That's true. But one more piece of news before we move on to America's Most Haunted News, and I know, man, is Donald Trump, man. Whoa, what a crazy news story this has been. I thought for sure after his comments about, people from Mexico all being criminals and rapists, he would have been done. It's just, he won't stop.
It's the situation, it's the classic car wreck or train wreck where people, they just can't seem to look away. He does have a little more political oomph and acumen than I would have thought that he has, certainly based on his last run, which lasted about a week.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is, I've read so many commentaries, and there's it runs the whole spectrum from just thinking he's the most laughable, idiotic fool who will drop dead of his own idiocy at any moment, to those who say, well, I mean, I guess you got to give him credit for getting as far as he has. But kind of the core commentary has been, remember how they called Reagan the Teflon president?
Sure.
Everything would just bounce off him.
Yep.
Well, that's the thing about Trump. He has such a miniature version of the world, and he is so absolutely without doubt about himself. He has truly the largest ego of any human being on earth. So far, all of this just rolls off his back.
It's crazy because
he is impenetrable.
I haven't seen
get in there.
I'm a little younger than you, and so the last president I ever saw that was this bulletproof was Bill Clinton.
Well,
Nothing.
He was too. You're right, but kind of for different reasons, and because he was coming from this kind of lifelong policy wonk. No one questioned his intelligence. No one questioned his knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
He started very, very young. Well, remember how young he was, early 40s when he was elected president. That is young to be president. Of course, Obama was nearly that young as well, which it's hard to remember because he's aged. His appearance has
I was
changed.
going to say, even if Donald does make it to the White House, and that's a ginormous if, but if he does, he's already old looking. What's going to happen to the comb-over in 4 years?
It's inconceivable. I can't imagine the Republican Party will allow him to be, one way or another, they will figure out a way to subvert him. He will not be the nominee for president, and he will not be the vice presidential nominee.
Well, did you hear that Jesse Ventura, of all people, talk about egos, has come up and said, "Oh, I'll run with him. Yeah, brother. I'll be your vice president." Yeah, he's the governor.
That is an egotistical pair. That is an astonishing thing. On the other hand, boy, you got to give Jesse credit, man. The guy was the governor of Minnesota.
Yeah, I remember that because I had to live through those days.
How did that happen? I can't even imagine.
Although here in Minnesota, when he was governor, everybody got a nice big fat check that we all called Jesse checks. We got rebates because there's a big government surplus at the time. And he says, give the money back to the people. And so we all got a nice big check.
He's a populist. There's no question about it. And to a certain extent, that's what Trump is running as, which is so interesting because here is a billionaire populist. Mm-hmm. That is a very unusual combination.
Isn't it?
He's not the normal kind of populist. He's not the democratic, man of the people populist. Yeah. He's the opposite. He's the diametrically opposed.
The 1%.
I am billionaire populist.
Exactly.
And one of the problems with our country and with our culture is we don't seem to be able to help ourselves that no matter what kind of a person they are, we look up to the very, very rich. There's something about us, there's something in our national psyche that gives the very, very, very rich. I'm not talking about regular old millionaires.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
regular old millionaire. I'd like to become a regular old millionaire. So if there's a few billionaires that are listening that would like to make this poor radio host a millionaire, feel free to do so.
I will participate in that as well, cheerfully.
Remember, leave no radio host behind.
But we give so much credit, and way too much credit, and we don't assume it's luck. We don't look at the inherited factor. We don't look at the almost inevitably immorality of those who become that wealthy, because it doesn't just happen.
No.
And you're not typically playing fairly. I mean, that was something that astonished me about the debate that he said. He was absolutely proud of those four bankruptcies, those four businesses, and he said, I mean, the implication was, I've made hundreds of deals. I could have dozens of bankruptcies by now, but I only have four. So in your face,
face, stick it.
Four.
Yeah,
I only have four bankruptcies, and I'm proud of them. And I use the rules. I use the tax code. I do what all super rich people do. I hire people who figure out every possible angle, and then I use them. Well, that's fine, but unfortunately, the vast majority of the population doesn't have that option.
No, we're poor, man. We're poor.
People. I know.
Yeah, I mean,
sad.
Most of us are poor. Let's just be honest. I mean, my gosh, you go to the grocery store, and let's just say, even if you go to Walmart grocery shopping, $100 goes nowhere in groceries anymore. I mean, we're all poor, and then we're like you said, we look up to the rich because we all aspire to be rich.
And the other side of it, or the other really key piece of all this, is almost no one, I won't say no one, because certainly CEOs, there are many a CEO who are very well paid by salary. But there are, by percentage, there's only a little teeny percentage of the very rich who got that way by virtue of salary.
Very true.
The very rich are making their money off of capital gains, off of business deals, things that have very little to do with actually generating goods and services for use by fellow man. It's a lot of that is simply manipulating the system. I don't blame people for doing it. If you can, great.
Sure.
But there's only a very, very small percentage, and it just seems like the people who have access to capital and who, I'm certainly not a Marxist, believe me, but if you have a large sum of money, it's much, much easier to work with the system, or I should say, to make the system work for you, than if you're living paycheck to paycheck, even if those paychecks are relatively large.
It's very, very true. Well said. Very well said. It's how you work the system. It's how you have the opportunity to work the system as well. But, man, getting off of politics for a minute, I know there's tons going on over America's Most Haunted. And if you guys want to follow
dive into that paranormal world I wallow day and night.
Why don't you jump? You are the Grand Poobah of the paranormal.
I am. I'm wearing my hat. Remember that hat the Grand Poobah wore from the Flintstones?
I do. I'm glad you have it on. Oh, look at that hat. Looks great.
It's stylish as all get out. Kind of makes my head wobble.
Well, this is summer.
Right, so, my friends, you can join us on America's Most Haunted Twitter right now, which is simply at AM Haunted, or essentially most of the same information is also on the Facebook AM Haunted, and that is also AM Haunted. So you can look it up by America's Most Haunted. I'm sure you'll find us, or just go facebook.com/AM Haunted. Very similar information is there. So let's talk about not all that paranormal, but very, very, very popular. Did you know that the most recent season, what they call season 8 of Doctor Who, is by far the most watched season in the what 50 some year history of Doctor Who.
Really? Why
and
is that?
This Peter Capaldi, who's my age, the guy's in his late 50s, he's by far the oldest, at least in a long, long time, to play Doctor Who. Everyone said was too old. He is the most watched Doctor Who of all time. And season 9 is coming up here just next month. And the first trailer for season 9 of Doctor Who is now up. And you can pick it up. I'm sure you can get it on the BBC America site, or just click off that link from our Twitter or Facebook. Next, scrolling down. Boy,
But
talk
first-
about a meeting of the middle-aged paranormal icons. Did you see this picture?
Dead.
Bruce Campbell and Elvira. I
They're
don't
hooking
even
it
wanna tell
up.
you
They're hooking it
how
up,
many
man.
years there are between them.
Okay, hey, man, I gotta be upfront and honest. Cassandra Peterson, Elvira, is hot. She's still sexy, man.
She is still sexy. Do you realize between the two of them, we're talking more than 120 years on Earth?
Oh my God, I didn't realize she was that old.
She is well over 60.
Oh, she's still looking great.
I
Now,
mean, well over
I feel a
60.
little weird now thinking she's hot.
It's a
because,
little weird.
You know, I mean, that's my grandma kind of territory, or my mom rather territory. My mom's only
No.
63. I mean,
I think she's older than your mother. I gotta
that just makes me feel slimy all
But let's
over.
face it, man. The baby boomers, of which I'm on the younger end, but I'm among the baby boomers. The baby boomers have made it okay to still play sexy well into your not so young anymore.
Well, I didn't realize she was that old. Now, like I said, now I feel a little creepy, but man, I can't help it.
Oh, she goes back to the early 80s.
Yeah, she's still a fox. I don't care what her age is. Some beauty is just timeless, and she's one of
It
them.
is. And of course, people love Bruce Campbell, and man, he's been around
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Did you know? Are you aware that he is going to have an Evil Dead TV show?
No, I you know what? I'm a big fan of the Evil Dead. I haven't been keeping up on old Bruce because I've met him a few times. Nice guy, great guy. And
Very big personality.
yeah, great guy. You know, one of those kind of guys that walks in the room and everybody turns their head and he doesn't even have to say a word.
Yes.
That's Bruce
Lots
Campbell.
of charisma. Lots of personality. Yeah, there's going to be, and it's called Ash versus the Evil Dead. And it'll be on Stars, the Stars network, so it will be a pay type situation.
Who has stars anymore? Really, seriously.
I don't.
You know,
I may have to because I'm interested in seeing the show.
it'll end up on Netflix because I think Stars still owns Netflix.
You're right. It will eventually end up on other formats. But it'll be something. And you know who's going to be on it?
Elvira.
Who's going to be on it? I don't
Elvira.
know about Elvira. She made Lucy Lawless.
Really?
The return of Lucy. Yes.
There's another fox that's got to be in her 50s anyway.
She's getting older, but she's not as old.
Yeah,
Let's say she's been around, yeah, but she was younger when she started. Yeah, I digging Lucy hard. She's been in several outlets lately. She was on she is on. Wait, let me think here. She was just on Salem. She's on Salem, the witch show. That's on WGN America. She appeared on that. It just finished its second season. All right. Now, you guys, because I am a paranormal media kind of guy, I've been high profile for the last couple of months because, of course, I haven't been on After Hours AM, at least live. But I get all kinds of solicitation, and people send me links. They want me to check out their videos and their investigation stuff. So I'm telling you, if you are near a computer, you really do, you got to go to either America's Most Haunted Facebook or AM Haunted on Twitter, because you got to click on this link. This is the true ghost caught on tape.
Now, is this video that I scroll down here on Twitter, and it looks like it's a night shot here of a Sony Handycam?
I was trying to decide. This is still very near the top. It's only as far as Twitter goes. The top one is tweet about the show that we're on right now. Then you got Dr. Doctor Who. Then you got Bruce and Elvira, and it's one right below that.
Exactly.
So I couldn't put up an image of it because that would give it away.
Gotcha.
So you gotta click on YouTube.
Okay.
And check it out. So you checking it out? You doing that?
I am right now. I will go there now. There's a sound of the video because I'll be able to hear it together. Oh, come
There's a little bit of
on.
sound.
Come on, Eric.
Now, is that the real thing or what?
Everybody needs to go over to YouTube, check out the video of this real ghost caught on camera.
It is really on tape.
It
is really a ghost.
It is really on tape.
You do not get more tangible. So at first, when I put that up, the reaction on Twitter was like, "Oh God, you so suck. I hate you." But then I noticed the tide turned. It was like, "Yeah, that was actually funny. I needed that today."
They had to think for a second of the humor. See, it's the kind of humor you think about for a minute.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, it's humor. It's dumb. I apologize if you are expecting to see something really life-changing, because it's not. But it's funny. Check it out. It's cool. Now, here's something that is real, or appears to be real. Who knows? We weren't there. But it's pretty well documented. It's actually one of the better Daily Mail stories. People put down the Daily Mail, and of course they really do exaggerate. Let's face it. And anything remotely paranormal, they play up to the hilt. But this one, the story itself seems to be quite well documented. The one thing I like about what they do in their stories, legit or not, is they have a ton of pictures.
But here's the problem with me and the Daily Mail.
Okay,
and I, before you dive into this, is I've fallen for their stories before, and they turned out to be bunk. Okay.
Oh, they're usually bunk.
Same with that Empire news site and stuff like
Yes,
that. You're like, oh my God, I can't
bunk.
believe that's going on. And then you dig into it, and you're like, oh, really? What? Why do you guys even try to fool us? It's not even nice to do. So I hope the Daily Mail, from all accounts, like you said, it's done really well. I want to believe the story. I do. So go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, you're 100% right, Joel. Often, I mean, even just within the story, they go, yeah, well, we were just kidding. The headline was just kidding, This is not what we were pretending. We have an explanation, and here's what it is, even within the same story.
Yeah.
But not this time. All right, so what this story is about is, of course, the typical creepy doll, and in this case, haunted doll. In this case, it's what they call a puppet. We would call it, we being American, not dopey Brits, we call it a marionette. So it's one that's controlled by strings from above. And a paranormal investigator named Jane Harris, who supposedly is fairly well known over there, and whose specialty is haunted dolls or puppets, such as they are, put this particular marionette, and I don't know, when I look at it, it doesn't strike me as anything special one way or the other. It looks like Ben Franklin, actually.
It kind of does. I'm looking at it, and it's creepy all on its own merits, though, even being haunted.
It is creepy, but, aren't they all? Let's face it. So
Yes.
she put Ben Franklin into a glass case.
Poor Ben.
With you're not treated well when you're a marionette. And she put it in a glass case for a very extended period of time, like months, and had a camera on it the entire time. And, of course, for the great majority of the time, nothing happened. But then, which is typical for a real paranormal investigation, most of the time, let's face it, nothing happens.
Generally.
However, very well documented by this sequence of pictures and video as well, but I think the pictures are more powerful, is the controller, the mechanism whereby, the wooden mechanism whereby the marionette is controlled, seemingly, for no reason that I can figure out anyway, went from leaning against the marionette and went through this whole very slow, deliberate process whereby it raised up so that eventually it was perpendicular. Then it continued forward until it was completely leaning the opposite way. Now, could something natural have caused this? I imagine.
I would imagine something
don't know
could,
what,
but I like how she has an EMF detector, a K2 meter, right next to Ben Franklin. He only discovered electricity. Thank you very much.
It's all up in his nutsack. Let's face it. I don't know if I'd want it. I don't know if I'd want it there. For me personally.
No,
it's right there, and so anyway, it's an interesting case. And as we always say, the caveat is always there. If you weren't there yourself, and we're just relying on quote unquote evidence. In this case, it would be video and photographic, although I imagine the photographs are just screenshots. But nonetheless, it's a fairly impressive and interesting, and it makes you scratch your head.
I'll give her that. I'll give her that. I mean, it makes you scratch my head, but interesting. I'll go with the interesting. Whether it's paranormal or not, jury's out.
Yeah, of course. And it's especially that interesting when it was reported and reputed, prior to her getting a hold of it, to be haunted. And theoretically, reportedly, the previous owner was actually attacked by this marionette.
Whoa!
So,
Ben Franklin got mad.
Ben Franklin got mad, but look, he's got strings attached to him. That'd make me mad. Yes. And, maybe the strings kind of somehow, some way got caught up with this poor guy, but maybe he was just, a knucklehead. Who knows? But anyway, it is more interesting than the average paranormal evidence.
Exactly. So everybody go check it out. Go to AM Haunted over there at Twitter. Scroll on down. Go take a look at the video for your very self. And let us know what you think, haunted or not haunted. But we got to run to break, everyone. Hang around. Don't go anywhere to this abbreviated edition of After Hours AM.
Patients can't afford a place to stay when the best treatment is far from home. A room shouldn't be the difference between life and death. Let's make sure that everyone who needs a room gets one. Let's make some noise. Let's help the American Cancer Society finish the fight.
Text ROOM to 41518 to donate $10.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires, or dating one. Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes two. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzzed driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzzed driving, because buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
I got a rather serious problem over here.
All right, what are we looking at?
Cranky mother-in-law, asleep on the couch, in the man cave.
Dear God.
It gets worse.
That's impossible.
She's passed out on the remote.
I stand corrected.
What do I do?
Okay, I want you to grab a Torin Big Red hydraulic bottle jack.
Okay.
Now you wedge that bad boy in under your mother-in-law and crank her up skyward.
It's working. And got the remote.
Great. Now grab that Torin Big Red 2-ton folding shop crane and put that woman on wheels.
And away we go.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At Ace, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at Ace, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. Ace.
The helpful place.
Only in the forest can you see this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. And you might just see this. Visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Do you have a question for our guest tonight? Don't feel like calling the show? Not a problem. Email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Again, that's afterhoursam@gmail.com. And we are back. After Hours AM coming right back at you. When we were leaving, we were talking about poor Benjamin Franklin being a marionette and being a little bit mad. But there's whole much more stuff going over there at AM Haunted at Twitter, and we're going to cover most of it tonight.
There sure is.
Man.
So what do you think about good old astronaut Edgar Mitchell? What are your thoughts on him?
Wow. This again comes from the Mirror, I'm sure. So, I don't know.
Yes, it does.
I don't know.
That's not exactly the same as a Daily Mail, except that it is.
It is. Peace-loving aliens tried to save America from nuclear war. Claims moon mission astronaut Edgar Mitchell.
Yeah, but he didn't see it.
No.
See, he's just people have told him.
Yeah, so this is all like secondhand knowledge from him.
So who cares who said it? In other words, Edgar Mitchell, his personal qualifications and the fact that he was an astronaut and went to the moon has no bearing on what people told him.
No, I mean, I could say...
He didn't see it. He didn't experience it.
No,
he's got this vague stuff about, when I was out in space, I saw some stuff that was weird.
Yeah,
well,
but he's been
everyone sees weird stuff when they're out in space.
But most people have kind of viewed him as a crackpot.
I think I was told by, and we will not name names because they're in the biz, people who have dealt with him say, man, he's just kind of a cranky old fart, man.
That'll happen, too. That'll happen, too, because you know who became really cranky, and he still's around, and I have respect for him, is Amazing Randy. He became really cranky over the years,
he was always cranky.
You know, I talked to him one time, like, whoa, you got a little extra salt in your veins, don't you there, buddy?
Yeah, that guy, yeah. I mean, he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he's a guy, I mean, on the one hand, sure, you respect the fact that he is driven, theoretically anyway, by the pursuit of truth. And he seeks to set right, the fuzzy, magical thinking of the poor, benighted populace. But on the other hand, he's ended up making a career out of it, and I think he, in some ways, can be just as disingenuous as those who have a stake, on the believing side.
I think so, because I saw a documentary with him in it on Netflix, of course, plugging them once again. And his life was fairly, really kind of interesting. But he was almost, and I know I might get some haters on this, I almost call him paranormal bully. Because, if he couldn't figure something out right away, he would make damn sure he ruined you.
Exactly. And, the way he set up his prize makes it almost impossible, because let's face it, a key element about the paranormal is it just doesn't work on demand.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be at least a little bit different criteria than true science. That's why I would not call it a science. It's not a science.
No,
it's a pseudoscience or it's a
exactly.
parascience. It's a field of inquiry. And that doesn't mean there aren't truths to be found there.
I mean, you want to talk about paranormal? Tom Brady's portrait. Now that was also paranormal, but
Wildly paranormal. It looks a little bit like the alien in the picture here with the Edgar Mitchell.
Oh, like a pass for brothers, to be honest with you. What I should do is Photoshop Tom Brady's face on that now. And put it out there.
Yeah, because, that's a well-built alien.
Oh, look at him.
He's lean, he's kind of muscular.
I would die for those abs. I'm telling you.
Chest out. Look at that. He's strutting around. He's got those pecs out. He's clearly an alien who strides purposefully.
He is a well-kept alien right there. You
Yeah.
know, I'm sure aliens have their fat generation too. Like
This is a lean and mean alien. This is an alien who does
that means business.
Zumba.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. He stays away from the icky part of town.
All right, so the big question, just to wrap up the story, is Edgar is claiming those he calls many Air Force officers who worked at the various silos, the nuclear missile silos, during the Cold War. He says that they said that UFOs frequently were seen overhead and disabled their missiles or their ability to control missiles. Now, I have heard that before. I've heard that from, various sources, that there's been an awful lot of unexplained or very difficult to explain problems with various controlling type devices, specifically regarding nuclear weapons. So
No.
does that mean that those devices are just kind of cranky and are difficult to control, or is there actually some reason, why that is so? I think ultimately, though, it always circles back around. Look, do we believe that there are actual aliens, extraterrestrials from other planets elsewhere in the solar system? Probably
Yes.
not. Elsewhere
I think
in our
so.
galaxy, maybe, who knows? I don't know. Or elsewhere in the universe, who have actually come to Earth and have apparently interacted. I myself am not yet convinced of that. How about you, Joel?
Well, I think that there's a possibility. I mean, even if we're talking about a race that has 1,000,000 years on us of civilization, that's 1,000,000 years more technology. Is it possible we've been visited? Sure, if you want to believe the conspiracy theorists about alien technology that we allegedly already are using in our everyday lives. But I also say to myself, okay, if I was an intelligent race of individuals, I would come to this little backwater planet and see us all fighting with each other. I would not want any part of it. I would say, okay, they're not mature enough to take part in our culture, so let's leave them alone, and hopefully one day they will be mature enough to accept us and be a member of the community of the solar system and the universe as a whole. I don't know.
Yes, that is certainly possible. I agree. For me, it still comes down to really just kind of a, prosaic kind of nuts and bolts thing.
Yeah, so I mean,
the thing is the speed of light. So
Yeah.
do you and I, Joel, do we believe that there are beings who have figured out a way to transcend the speed of light? Because that's the only way to make it work. The universe is just too
yeah,
big.
and Einstein steps in and says, that ain't happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, in theory, there are the things that do happen in the universe faster than the speed of light. It would appear that this, and we've talked about this before, this whole question of quantum entanglement, where an action that you take upon one particle that is entangled with another, even if that other particle is all the way on the opposite end of the universe. I mean, if it's a trillion light years away, which that's a long way.
That is a very long way.
Instantaneously, that other particle reflects the action that was taken on the one by you.
Boy, I don't know, man. You know,
how can that happen? I don't know.
I'm so firmly on the fence. It's not even funny, to be honest with you.
You're so firmly on the fence, it's uncomfortable.
You know, it's like, I don't know. I could go either way. I need evidence. I have not seen any.
Yeah, that's about where I am. I'm slightly more negative about UFOs or about aliens. Now I'm not talking about life elsewhere in the universe. I think it's probably very likely.
Sure. Well, we're here, so.
Statistics alone, right, that there is life of some kind. Now, I don't know what kind that is. It may just all be very elemental. We may be elementary. We may be the only advanced, quote-unquote, technological, put it that way, species
well,
in the entire universe. That is possible. We're the only ones. But I still think there's some kind of life. Because everything they're finding, just lately, all these recent discoveries, even just within our own solar system, there could well be very elementary life right now.
Well, you know, the thing of it is do you remember way back in the 90s when the space rock crashed into Earth and they found microbes on it from outer space?
Well, they found
fossils of microbes.
Yeah, right. Fossils of microbes, or what could be fossils of microbes. You know, there's this other guy, I forget his name, but he's a real scientist. He's not fake. And he's saying material that he is collecting at the very, very, very tippy top of the Earth's atmosphere is not coming from below. It's not rising from below, from the Earth. It's actually coming from space.
Well, I suppose enough space dust and everything else to accumulate. I mean, you know, let's just face it, our atmosphere is there to protect us, protect the Earth. So it could work like a filter that way.
Sure. And that's another aspect, another very critical factor regarding, how advanced life may have become, assuming that it exists elsewhere, anywhere at all. The question then is, for it to advance, the Earth, thus far, even though they're finding now all these exoplanets, is turning out they're very common. They're not uncommon at all. There are billions or maybe trillions of planets that are somewhat, at least, similar to Earth. You know, they're in a broadly interpreted Goldilocks zone near their star, whatever star they're circling, and they're rocky, which those are the two kind of key things, and have water. Three things, I guess, that we, as far as what we know about life, that would have to be present. It has to be rocky, there has to be some kind of water, and it has to be in a certain area. Can't be too close and it can't be too far from its star. But the really interesting key thing about the Earth, besides us having such a thick and large atmosphere, it physically goes way out, is our magnetic zone. We are very much protected by our magnetism.
You know, I am more afraid of a solar X-flare with massive EMF taking everything out than I am aliens crashing into us, to be honest with you.
Well, sure, it's more likely.
If we're talking about dangers from outer space, I'm more afraid of our own sun frying us someday soon with a massive X-flare.
Hopefully not soon, but you're exactly right to bring that up, because that's one of the key things that our magnetism protects us from.
Exactly. So if we lose our ozone layer anymore, that could expose us more to those flares.
All right. Well, having pontificated thusly on UFOs, let's move on to werewolves.
Yes, werewolves. Let's look at this. I can't wait to get there.
Is that a great
Look at that thing. It looks like, you know what it looks like, though? It looks like a guy in a suit wearing tails. Look at it really close, doesn't it? Huh?
It does. But I love the legs. They're
I do
canine
too.
kinds of legs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it really looks actually like, much to me, more like a very tall fox.
It does. What does the fox say?
Wolf. But it is such a cool picture. So the backstory on this, not that it really matters.
I'm looking at it. It's great.
We're scroll down, and again, we're on AM Haunted on Twitter. Or on Facebook. And so this was a photograph taken in the Brazilian city of, I won't even try to pronounce it, but it's Ceilandia. So pronounce that in Portuguese, because remember, they speak Portuguese in Brazil, not Spanish. And a lot of people don't know that.
No, they do not.
It will be reinforced after the Olympics next summer because everyone will be hearing Portuguese. They'll go, why are they speaking Portuguese in Brazil? Because they do. All right, anyway, so this is this town in east central Brazil, Ceilândia, something like that, for lack of actual ability to speak Portuguese. And this picture is, I mean, it's a werewolf, purported werewolf, just strolling down the street.
Yeah, look at that. He's just kind of hanging out, like he's the man, just like, hey, guys, what's going on?
He's well dressed. He's just striding purposefully.
That's the werewolf. That's
just
right.
Down the middle of the street, man. There he is.
That's a werewolf ready for the night on the town.
He is. Werewolves of London. You could see him drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's.
That's right. I'd like to meet his tailor.
And his hair was perfect, by golly. So, yes, this leads, our link leads to a mysterious universe story about this werewolf. So go check that out.
Okay, do you believe in werewolves?
Not really.
Because I used to love the movie American Werewolf in London when I was a kid.
That's one of my favorites.
That movie freaked me out. I mean, John Landis did a great job in that movie.
What's so unusual about that movie, even to this day, there are very few movies that are both that funny and that horrifying. It is a real horror movie, but it is also funny as hell.
When I watched that guy turn into a werewolf, that was it for me. I'm like, they gotta be real. That was really filmed. It had to be. Look at that.
It's an amazing. That's still considered, even though it's, practical, it's not CGI. That is still considered one of the great transformation scenes.
Oh, what a great film. I mean, just top to bottom. They don't make them like that anymore. But werewolves as actually existing, no, I do not believe in them. But man, Halloween's right around the corner, somewhat. And I'd like to think a little part of me thinks there are werewolves.
What, in your mind, in your estimation, what is the source of the many, 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 many reports of dogmen, werewolves, just the various,
vampires,
shiftery kinds of
Sure.
type things. What can the Lizard Man? Did you see that? The Lizard Man is back in is it North Carolina or South Carolina?
I want to say
South Carolina.
Yeah, I want to say it's South. But see, I had a friend that I went to high school with that actually joined the Peace Corps, and he went to these in Eastern Europe. He ended up going to Eastern Europe, way up to these mountains and these villages that have never had any exposure of any kind to Western entertainment at all. I mean, like, they're lucky if they have a generator somewhere. I mean, no electricity, no nothing, okay? But yet, they are taking precautions after someone dies to stake down their dead.
Oh, yeah.
And they have they've never seen a movie. They've never even talked to a Westerner.
That's folklore that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years.
So where does it come from? You're right. Where does it come from? Where does it originate from to scare even people like that so badly that they're willing to stake down their dead?
There's and that the French, the classic werewolf story, as far as in terms of with a historical basis that the French guy, that Giles, I'm pronouncing it in English, of course, from way back, I don't know, the 1500s, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it was absolutely documented that this creature, person, whatever, you know, killed hundreds of people.
Yes.
At least dozens, and ripped them apart. So was this some sort of just utterly deranged human? I mean, I guess people can be utterly vicious and utterly insane.
Well, yeah, they can go psycho. I mean, look at the things that we have even happening today with people, the horrible acts that they do. So, I mean, you know, is it beyond the realm of thought that there's a madman out there that went just berserko and acted like a wolf because he's psychotic and killed a bunch of people and therefore, werewolves are born? No, that could happen. It sure could. Get enough of them go crazy. I mean, look at the witch trials in Salem. All because their bread was made with the wrong kind of rye. I mean, really, quite honestly, anything could happen back in those days, especially back in those days. But I think even today we can have those cases happen and people still mistaking it for a paranormal event.
You're right. I agree. It's no one went broke, underestimating the potential brutality and just madness of humans, and people can just go utterly crazy.
Oh yeah, they flip that switch,
or just be completely evil.
Yeah, it's like there's a flip.
And do horrible, awful things. I wasn't even thinking so much about deaths, real, actual deaths caused by purported such things. I'm thinking more just all of the sightings. So are they all just wrong? Are they all just mistaken? Could there be something that we don't know about? I mean,
you know what?
This all kind of bleeds. It bleeds from werewolves. There's certainly elements, of the folklore that lead into the whole vampire culture as well. And then on the other end, it kind of bleeds into Bigfoot. So
exactly.
Is any of this real? I don't know. I'm the closest to believing in Bigfoot, as we've discussed. I'm pretty much 50-50. Wouldn't surprise me either way.
I say, show me a body. I want a body.
I do too.
Before I even say that,
or a piece of a body. Anyway.
Something. Give me something. All these years of research has yielded bunk. Come on, show me something a little more concrete than a footprint or a tufted hair that turns out to be a baboon.
All right, let's squeeze one more in. We only have a few more minutes.
Yes, this is abbreviated.
Next week, let's remind everyone, man, we will be back in the fullest force, back to the full 2-hour show. We'll have a super cool guest. We'll chat amiably for a half hour and go over the news and just be our amazing, entertaining selves. And then we will chat even more amiably with our amazing, amazing paranormal guests.
And before you move on, for anyone that downloads the MP3 of this show, when it's done, you will have a super special add-on that is one of our most popular shows from the vault added on there. So when you download the show, you'll also get that very, very special MP3 right along with it.
That is super cool. All right, so have you heard about Go Topless Day?
I have, and I support that.
Well, who doesn't in their right mind? Let's face it. Who doesn't want to see it all out?
Well, it all depends. It all depends on who's participating, I guess.
Well, yes.
But Go Topless,
I guess if you really want to see it, just frickin' go to Europe and go to a beach.
Well,
but
exactly.
Nonetheless, Go Topless Day basically is there to protest the supposed hypocrisy that men, no matter how grotesque they may be, can go shirtless.
That is true. The moobs is what they call it.
Women, at least almost all places, not New York City, as it turns out, but most cities have laws that stipulate that women must cover their nipples. So, anyway, that's what Go Topless Day is. What's really interesting is, and again, you're clicking through from either Facebook or
Twitter, AM Haunted,
is there's a really interesting story on the LAist, so it's, of course, geared toward Los Angeles, my hometown. So I like to stay in touch with what's going on there. So, but a really good story, very, very interesting background on how the Go Topless movement actually is tied in. Now, have you heard of this religion? It's a UFO religion called the Raelians.
You know, I heard something about that, and on December 13th, 1973, yeah, I've heard vaguely about it. Why don't you fill me in on them? We got a minute left. Give me the quick rundown on these guys.
The bottom line is they are, welcoming of aliens, and they don't even call them aliens. They're here. They've been here all along. It's the story that they have helped us, get to where we are and help us develop. And they seek for us to develop further, and they're kind of waiting for us to catch up so that we stop being knuckleheads, so that they will then kind of help us to the next level. So that's the bottom line. Part of it is a very open approach to sexuality. Sure. and to the human body. So the guy who founded it was accused of doing a lot of creepy things sexually. Yeah. And that's kind of at the core of it as well. So it's interesting, though, that this Go Topless Day, which, the vast majority of people who participate in that have no idea that it actually derived originally from this Raelian UFO, sexy UFO movement.
Interesting. I did not even know that. I didn't even put those two together. But, man, what a show we have had tonight, to be honest with you. We're right up against the hour. But I want everybody to stick around for a very special edition of After Hours AM. If you download this MP3, which if you're hearing it now, you probably have downloaded it, or you will here in a minute. Enjoy the one from the vault that everyone's wanted to hear, but I haven't played in a long time. But, Eric, thanks for sitting in, man. I cannot wait to get back to full steam.
Oh, we will. And if all goes well, which we assume it will, we hope it will, we will also eventually anyway, and by eventually I don't mean too long, weeks, months, a month or two at the most, we would like to be able to add back in the Tuesday night more broad-based storyteller show. So we have every intention of getting back to absolutely full groove. We apologize from the pit of our hearts for taking what turned out to be most of the summer off. It was completely unintentional, and it was not something that we would have planned or expected, nor something that we're happy about. So thank you so much for returning to us, and we're going to do our very best to be as interesting and entertaining as we can be from here on out, and by next Thursday, we'll be back full groove.
Absolutely, everybody. Hey, from the bottom of our hearts, the bottom of yours, we love you guys. Take care of each other. Keep listening to After Hours AM. And remember, visit the AM Haunted at twitter.com often to get your fix of paranormal stories. Until next time, I'm Joel Sturgis and
Eric Olson.
And keep being creepy, guys. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter. Go live right now.
Okay.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
special edition of After Hours AM. We are actually talking serial killers tonight, and it's a subject matter I didn't know a ton about.
I don't know a lot about it either.
Until I kind of jumped into Harold's work here. Harold Scheck. Can you please pronounce your last name for me? I do not want to massacre your last name.
Appreciate that. It's Schechter.
Schechter. There it is. That's what I thought it was, but I thought in the back of my head, you know what? I hate it when my last name's slaughtered, so I figure I'd let you do it. Is a professor of American literature and culture at Queens College, the University of New York. Boy, he has written about them all. You know, he's done a lot of nonfiction work. He's done a lot of real hardcore serial killer stuff. You wrote the books Fatal, Friend Depraved, Deranged, Depraved.
Yep.
Those are really, really good books. And that's all nonfiction.
Oh, thank you.
And then your fiction work is The Telltale Corpse, The Humbug. Wow, Nevermore, The Mask of Red Death. Those are Edgar Allan Poe stuff. And I got to say, when I looked at that as well, you are a very, very talented writer, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that very much.
Not a problem. You deserve every accolade you have. And,
thank you.
Harold, we're going to hit the ground running. I'm going to ask you, what kind of got you mixed up in this world of serial killers?
Well, I'm a baby boomer, so I grew up at a time when, the TV and movies were just full of all this horror stuff. I spent my childhood watching all these Friday night, Fright Night shows and so on, and reading all these horror comics. So, I've always been real interested in horror and monsters and, why people are interested in hearing about horror and monsters. And then at a certain point, I discovered, this is about in my 30s, I guess, had become a writer by then. And I discovered that Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which are two of my favorite horror movies, were both based on an actual killer, Ed Gein of Wisconsin. And that was very fascinating to me. It's also, as it turns out, Thomas Harris based his character, Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, partly on Ed Gein. So, here were from my point of view, three scariest movies of the 60s, 70s, and 80s that had all been based on an actual criminal. And I started to look into that case, and that became the subject of my first serial killer book, Deviant. And after that, that just seemed to be a subject that fascinated me and that I seemed, for better or worse, to have some kind of gift for writing about. So, that became the basis of my career as a serial killer writer.
The Ed Gein one is close to where we're in northern Minnesota by the Wisconsin border here. And so he is well known up here, the Ed Gein story. A lot of people, even to this day up here, they don't really talk about it a lot. But when they do talk about it, it's almost out of fear.
Well, he was, kind of it sounds strange to say it. He's turned out to be sort of an important cultural figure in, late 20th century and early 21st century American culture. Many people regard the Gein case as the beginning of modern American horror, largely because he directly inspired Psycho. And, Psycho was the beginning of this whole kind of slasher movie trend, that we still dominates a lot of horror movies and stuff. So, of all the horrible crimes that unfortunately happen, almost on a daily basis, there are only a handful that kind of become these, you have to say, almost mythic kind of crimes, like Lizzie Borden, or the Leopold and Loeb case in the 1920s, or the Charles Manson case in the 1960s. And, Ed Gein is one of those kind of mythic American crimes.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when I did mention it that aren't from here, asked me, well, who's this Ed Gein character? And I figure I'd wait to tell that until I had someone as knowledgeable as you are to kind of give them the quick rundown of what he was all about.
Well, Dean was a farmer in Wisconsin, lived in a small town called Plainfield, in sort of 90 miles northwest of Madison, Wisconsin. Very kind of, at that time, hard scrabble area of the country. One journalist at the time called that area the Great Dead Heart of Wisconsin. Anyway, Dean lived with his family in this remote farmhouse outside of this very small town. And he had a brother named Henry, mother, father. The father apparently was kind of an abusive, alcoholic type who died when the boys were relatively young, leaving them to live with this very religiously fanatical mother who raised them to believe that women were evil and sex was evil. And Ed, in particular, was this sort of extreme mama's boy who was completely under the thumb of this domineering mother. His brother Henry died under very mysterious circumstances, and given what later emerged about Ed, some people feel that Ed might have actually murdered his own brother, partly because the brother started to become very, very critical of the mother, and also possibly because Ed just wanted the mother to himself. In any case, Ed was left living alone in this ramshackle, isolated farmhouse with this crazy mother.
Oh, boy.
And eventually she died of a stroke, and he was left living all by himself in this very, very creepy dilapidated farmhouse outside of town. And the people in Plainfield just sort of regarded him as the village weirdo, He was actually not a stupid man, but he did have a sort of simple-minded kind of way about him. Anyways, it turned out he was so obsessed with his mother that after her death, he tried to dig up her body and bring it home with him, which he was unable to do because that area of Wisconsin has very sandy soil, and a lot of graves are lined with concrete vaults. And it turns out his mother was buried in one of those, so he couldn't get to his mother. But for a 12-year period, beginning in 1945, after her death, Ed would very carefully read the newspapers, and whenever some local woman, middle-aged or elderly woman, who vaguely resembled his mother, whenever one of them would die, he would drive out in his pickup truck to the cemetery at night and dig up her body and bring it back to his farmhouse and dissect the body.
Oh.
And he was, people think of Ed Gein as a serial killer, and he did end up killing a few women, but he was mostly a necrophile. He was preying on the dead. He would dig up these women's corpses, bring them back to his farmhouse, dissect their bodies, and make different kinds of artifacts out of their body parts. He would make upholster his chairs with their skin, and he would make belts out of their body parts and the shade pulls out of their lips. But he also would skin their faces and tan them and stuff them and hang them up in his bedroom as kind of hunting trophies almost. And he also he flayed the upper torso and the lower torso of some corpses, and he made them into a skin suit. And he dressed himself up in the skins of these women and pretend he was his own mother.
That would be where the Norman Bates probably took off from, that story, to be used.
Well,
in
the Norman
Hollywood.
Bates thing, and also the Buffalo Bill. That's where Thomas Harris got the Buffalo Bill idea, as you I'm sure remember in Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Buffalo Bill is a serial killer who is making a skin suit out of the skin of his female victims.
Yeah.
So anyway, this went on for about 12 years, and finally Ed murdered. I guess he ran out of suitable corpses in the local cemetery, so he murdered a woman. He murdered a woman named Bernice Warden, who was a 60-something-year-old grandmother who ran the local hardware store. He murdered her on the first day of deer hunting season in 1957, when he knew all the men would be out of town in the woods, and he brought her corpse back to his farmhouse and strung her up in his summer kitchen and dressed the body out as a deer. Beheaded her, gutted her. Anyway, when her son came back and discovered she was missing and saw these blood stains on the floor of the hardware store, Dean had come in and shot her in the head. They kind of a suspicion immediately fell on Dean because he had been kind of hanging around the store and bothering the grandmother, and or Frank's mother. And the police immediately went out to Dean's place and found this body hanging up there, and then they broke into his house and discovered this house of horror full of all these body part relics and artifacts. And anyway, it was a huge case. I mean, Life magazine, which of course at that time basically every household in America got, had it as its lead story in December 1957, and Time magazine covered it, and Newsweek covered it. It was just a huge story at the time, and Robert Bloch, who is a horror writer living in Wisconsin, then based his novel Psycho on it. So anyway, that's basically the Dean story in a nutshell.
Now, what makes a serial killer?
A serial killer?
Yeah. What makes it? Is it like a body count you have to achieve, or what's... I'll let you answer that.
Well, there's a big distinction between serial murder and mass murder. Serial murder, the term serial killer is very, very recent. In my own researches, I discovered that it wasn't used in the newspapers until the 1980s. The first time it actually appeared in print was in 1982 or so, in a discussion of the Atlanta serial murders, the child murders down in Atlanta.
Sure.
But the crime itself has always existed, and basically what is meant by serial murder is what used to be called lust murder. It's really a crime of extreme sexual sadism, where you have these killers. I'm talking about people like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer, the kind of classic serial killers of the 70s and 80s that we associate with the term. These people are extreme sexual sadists who derive very, very sick pleasure from stalking and capturing and torturing their victims, which provides them, again, with a very depraved kind of sexual pleasure. So what serial killing basically is it's a series of murders that are committed by a person with some kind of what the FBI calls a cooling off period between them. In other words, they'll commit a murder, one of these horrendous murders, which they'll take a victim and again subject them to all kinds of torture and stuff from which they derive this sexual pleasure. And then a certain amount of time will go by before their next murder. And they'll continue to do this,
Gotcha.
Over and over again. I mean, it's hard to put a numerical number on serial killer, 2, 3, 4, whatever. But the main thing is that, serial murder roughly follows the pattern of normal male sexual behavior in the sense that, this person will fantasize about this act build up this overwhelming desire for it, you know, and go out and seek a victim and then perform the act, and you know, as sick as it is, the torture and the killing will usually culminate in a sexual climax for this person, and then, you know, and then they'll be satisfied for a while, and then that need will build up again, and they'll go out and seek another victim, and so on and so forth. And they'll keep doing it for as long as they can get away with it, because, you know, it provides them with this pleasure. They don't want to be caught. They want to keep on doing it.
So it's a bit of a myth that they say, that I've read a couple different places, that serial killers secretly want to get caught.
Well, you know, that's generally not true. You know, most serial killers do not want to get caught. You know, it is the case, you know, it seems to be the case. There have been some serial killers, I think, who do feel at some point that they are in the grip of some horrible compulsion that they would like to free themselves from. I mean, there's a very famous case, for example, back in the 40s, there was a young man named William Hirons, who was known as the lipstick killer.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he famously, at one of the crime scenes, he's known as the lipstick killer because at one of the crime scenes he wrote on a mirror in the apartment of the woman he had just killed. He wrote, "Stop me before I kill again." But that's really pretty unusual. You know, most serial killers, if you look at, again, John Wayne Gacy or Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer or the BTK killer, you know, or a lot of these guys. I mean, I live on Long Island in New York. There's a serial killer known as the Gilgo Beach killer. They found a bunch of young women prostitutes whose bodies were dumped on a beach here. You know, nobody knows who he is. I mean, you know, most serial killers do not want to get caught. And they don't want to get caught because they enjoy what they're doing and want to keep doing it for as long as possible.
Right. Exactly. Is that why there's so many more men serial killers versus women serial killers?
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, there actually are quite a few women serial killers. It's just that female serial killers tend to commit their crimes in a different way than men do. Most female serial killers have been poisoners, but there actually have been quite a few female serial killers. That is, you know, women who, again, enjoy killing a series of people and torturing them, really, with poison over the course of years. I mean, you know, when you think of, again, Bundy, Gacy, etc., that's just a very male form of serial murder.
Yeah.
You know, like Jack the Ripper, for example. I mean, Jack the Ripper is the modern prototype of a serial killer. But again, that's just the male form of serial murder. There's a female form of serial murder, and the female form of serial murder tends to take, again, the form of poisoning somebody. Mm-hmm. But what people don't often realize about that is that, you know, dying, you know, by slow poisoning is often more horrific than, let's say, you know, some of these female poisoners are worse than Jack the Ripper.
Well, yeah,
you know,
I would imagine. Yeah, because I was reading in some of your writings about this particular nurse that would kill her patients.
Yeah. Jane Toppin. I mean, she was the one who got me interested in the whole phenomenon of female serial murder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she was a private nurse, and she ended up confessing to over 31 murders. She's actually considered the most prolific American serial killer before John Wayne Gacy.
Wow.
And you know, sometimes people think of these female poisoners as this kind of quaint Victorian, you know, arsenic and old lace, you know, sort of thing. But, you know, Jane Toppin would, again, she was a nurse, so she knew how these poisons worked.
Yeah.
She would, you know, slowly poison her victims and, you know, bring them close to death and then pull back and let them revive a little and then poison them again. And you know, Jack the Ripper would basically slit the throat of his victims, they died very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the horrible things he did to them was after they were dead already. But somebody like Jane Toppin was subjecting her victims to days and sometimes weeks, you know, of slow torture. And then finally, when she was ready to allow them to die, she would give a lethal dose of poison to them and crawl into bed with them and embrace them while they were dying, so she could feel their death throes, and she would have a sexual climax at that time. So she was again a what used to be called a lust murderer.
Yeah.
Which is what what came to be called serial killers. So,
it's unreal. Serial killers, or the term serial killers, like you said, is fairly new, but these individuals have been around a very long time.
Well, I mean, I think they've always been around. I think that it's just some small, thankfully, percentage of human beings. And again, it's sometimes people think it's just an American phenomenon, but it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's an age-old phenomenon. Years ago, I read a really fascinating book by a couple of Harvard anthropologists. It's a book called Demonic Males, and it's about the origins of male violence. It looks at chimpanzee behavior, and what these people discovered studying chimpanzees is that, they're incredibly violent creatures, and they routinely commit acts that are very, very similar to the kinds of things that, serial killers commit. Just kind of gratuitously cruel forms of torture and cannibalism and all kinds of stuff. And, if one is a believer in human evolution, which I am, we're very closely related to chimpanzees.
So some of this is just human nature.
It's human nature. It's just, unfortunately, we're a very, very violent species. If you look at again, the archaeologists have found very clear evidence, that back in the caveman era, human beings routinely committed cannibalism, and so on. So, I just think human beings are violent. Well, it's one of the reasons I'm talking to you now is that, we are interested in hearing about this stuff.
Oh, exactly. The guy actually, the one that scared me the most, I guess in some ways, they all scary, but Ted Bundy. I watched some of his video. He was so intelligent.
Yeah.
And he was just so cold. I mean, when you look at Charles Manson, you see crazy. Yeah. Okay? When you watch Ted Bundy, even in the courtroom, he was cool, calm, and collected all the way through.
Yeah. Manson was not a stupid person. But the point about Bundy, I mean, this is one of the things that makes serial killers so terrifying, is that they appear to be so normal. There's a famous book about psychopaths called The Mask of Sanity. And, one thing that I've discovered a lot of people are not totally aware of is the difference between a psychopath and a psychotic. People tend to use those words interchangeably, but they mean very different things. Psychotic is a person with a schizophrenic. I mean, somebody whose personality is really kind of shattered, and who hears voices and has hallucinations. Ed Gein actually was probably psychotic. He was having all kinds of hallucinations and hearing voices. And, there are some serial killers who do. They, hear voices telling them to murder people and so on. But most serial killers are what's called psychopaths. And psychopaths are very rational people, often with an above-average intelligence, who are able to seem very, very normal and very, very ordinary.
Kind of fit in, with the rest of us.
I'm sorry?
Kind of fit in with the masses.
Yeah, totally.
Wolf
but they lack, they lack a conscience. They lack any capacity for human empathy. And, they see other human beings as just objects to be manipulated and exploited for their own pleasure. And, Bundy is a classic example of that. Mm-hmm. They're very, they're terrifying because, they're rational people who use their rationality, to commit these horrendously evil acts.
That make them feel good.
Well, it makes it feel good, but it also makes it very, very difficult for ordinary. Well, it makes it, it makes their victim. It makes people very vulnerable to them, because they just seem so normal. And psychopaths also tend to be very, very manipulative. They tend to be con artists. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very easy to fall into these traps, they said.
Well, that's how they get their prey, so to speak.
Exactly.
It's like
the predators.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, the predators, but they don't seem like predators. No. The predators who just seem as, not only normal, but they often, can seem very, very, very charming.
Likable individuals. I mean, from outside.
Well, yeah, because they have to lure their victims in.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Exactly.
They don't have a web like a spider does, so they have to rely on their charm.
Well, exactly.
Right. That is so scary. I mean, when you watch movies about ghosts and goblins and this and that does not scare me half as much as serial killers do.
Well, I think that's partly because ghosts and goblins don't actually exist, but serial killers do.
Well, they're right around the corner. You don't know. I mean,
they could be anywhere.
I read an article recently when I was getting ready for the show that there are anywhere from like 250 serial killers out there at any time.
Well, I mean, that seems like a very high estimate. I mean, the estimates that I've always heard are lower than that. And, it is important to realize that most serial killers around, tend to prey on what they call victims of opportunity. I mean, for example, the one that has been at large here on Long Island, and I know a few years ago there's one in Atlantic City. I mean, the majority of these kinds of criminals tend to prey on, people like prostitutes and so on. In general, the average middle-class American person is unlikely to run into a serial killer.
Now, why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is?
Why do you think?
Well, again, I think that it's a sex crime, and they tend to target victims. Yeah, again, prostitutes are what are called victims of opportunity. Mm-hmm. They just, if you want to torture and murder, if you're a male heterosexual serial killer, and there are gay serial killers also, but if you're a male, sexual serial killer, I think there are two reasons. First of all, again, it's easy to pick up a prostitute and lure her to some place, a motel room or whatever, where you can commit this act.
Yeah.
But there is another element as well, which is that a lot of these male heterosexual serial killers are full of a kind of actual loathing for women. They often tend to see women as these loathsome, disgusting creatures, mm-hmm. and prostitutes kind of embody that for them. There's a whole kind of serial killer that used to be called in the old days harlot killers. Again, Jack the Ripper is kind of a prototype for them.
Sure.
But there have been many male serial killers like that. That they see prostitutes as kind of embodying the most loathsome aspect of womanhood. Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of vengeance they're taking on these people. So
wow, I am up against a break here, so we got to go ahead and get out of here. But when we come back, we're going to talk more about serial killers. This is a fascinating subject. I'm really, really liking this. We'll be right back in about 5 minutes, folks.
Enjoy the music.
How's it hanging, Phil? Child's Play 2. He's the original. He'll take your breath away. This fall, Chucky rules. Did you miss me, Andy? I sure missed you. Child's Play 2. Keep an eye out for it.
Carl Sagan once wrote that the questioning mind needs to be instilled with both skepticism and wonder, for the universe is a pretty big place, filled with undelved mysteries, sciences, and life that we've barely begun to comprehend. Every month, Intrepid Magazine brings you both the wondrous and the skeptical. Intrepid Magazine focuses on science, metaphysics, UFOs, politics, conspiracies, and unexplained phenomenon, all offered up by Intrepid's cadre of writers and contributors, comprised of a host of seasoned authors, pundits, and recognized names in their fields. The universe is indeed a big place, and where other magazines leave off, Intrepid Mag is just beginning. Subscribe to Intrepid Magazine today at www.intrepidmag.com. That's www.intrepidmag.com.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At ACE, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at ACE, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. ACE,
The helpful place.
The adventure of a lifetime awaits you in faraway Egypt. The Exodus Reality Adventure, February 12th to 26th of 2014. Join archaeologist Dr. John Ward and historian Scotty Roberts, co-authors of The Exodus Reality, as they retrace their expedition searching for the historical Moses and the Great Exodus. There are 10 seats available. For details, go to exodusreality.com. The land of the pharaohs beckons. Will you answer the call to adventure?
Altman, director of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society and host of Beyond the Edge Radio, and you're listening to After Hours AM.
And welcome back to After Hours Radio. Before we left, we were talking about all things serial killers, and we're going to continue to do that because I have a ton of questions, more popping in my head as we talk. I got a question for you, Harold. Has anybody ever just shown up to the police station and said, "Hey, I'm a serial killer, take me in"?
Not to my knowledge, no. No. Again, serial killers, for the most part, derive their deepest pleasure, even, you have to say, kind of ecstasy almost, from committing these kinds of crimes. So, again, there is the case, even William Hirons, who I mentioned, the famous lipstick killer, who wrote on the mirror of one of his crime scenes, "Please stop me before I kill again," did everything he could not to get arrested. So, to my knowledge, there has never been a serial killer, who has voluntarily turned himself in.
Okay. I recently watched the movie again, Seven, and that's a great movie with Brad Pitt in it, and I recommend it to anyone that hasn't seen it.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
It seems, though, after I did a lot of research for the show and I've watched the movie, that movie is so far from reality of how it kind of works, it's not even funny.
Well, yeah, generally speaking, these Hollywood depictions of serial killers, well, as you'd expect, they're very, very exaggerated. Same thing is true with Hannibal Lecter. There haven't really been these genius-level serial killers, and something like, there is something called this, serial killers often have what criminologists call a signature, which is some little kind of...
little calling card saying, yep, it was me.
Yeah, kind of calling card. The Boston Strangler, for example, would sometimes leave the whatever he used to kill his victims tied in a little bow and so on. But the whole notion that a serial killer would arrange his victims in this elaborate kind of tableau, to represent one of the 7 deadly sins, is just a total kind of Hollywood fantasy.
Yeah.
The notion that you have a serial killer like Hannibal Lecter who translates Dante, and is an incredible gourmet, cook and so on and so forth. Again, it's kind of a Hollywood fantasy.
Yeah, I would imagine that those, if they are out there, extremely far and few between, because they're probably too preoccupied with their next high as a serial killer.
Well, again, most serial killers are, they're very, very ordinary, people.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, the only thing that, Ed Gein's a good example. I mean, Ed Gein was, he wasn't mentally challenged in a way. I mean, he had a relatively normal IQ, but he was no genius. And, he was pretty much a total non-entity, except for the kind of crimes he committed. The only thing that really distinguishes some of these people is that they are capable, of getting away for an extended period of time, with these horrible murders. So.
Yeah, exactly, like the cooling off period we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and again, that cooling off period, is kind of it's basically analogous. This is to in terms of a normal person having sex, after that sexual need is met, there's a certain period where that need subsides.
Exactly.
And then again, it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then the serial killer needs to find another victim, and then again the need subsides for a while, and so on, which is why serial murder, the pattern of serial murder is similar to that of normal sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, now I watch a lot of Criminal Minds.
Uh-huh.
Now, do you guys profile the serial killers similar to Criminal Minds, the way they do?
Again, the profiling thing is very, very controversial. For the most part, I think that the way profiling is portrayed in movies on TV, again, it's very, very, very exaggerated. It's almost like the way, Sherlock Holmes will be able to solve a crime, by this almost superhuman kind of thing. I have a friend who's a medical examiner, for example, and he calls the show CSI. He refers to it as crime scene science fiction. In reality, profilers have not, for the most part, criminal profiling hasn't proven to be that effective, in tracking down serial killers. I think they could make certain sorts of generalizations about the serial murder, but the notion that they can identify so precisely who the killer is.
They say, this guy's 5'10", 110 pounds, he's a white male, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, how do you get that from him strangling this woman?
Well, again, it's like with, because it's like, with the original Sherlock Holmes stories, Sherlock Holmes will look at, somebody will have dropped a wrist, pocket watch,
mm-hmm.
and Sherlock Holmes will look at it under his magnifying glass, again, be able to say, he'll say, the person who owned this pocket watch was 6 feet tall and weighed 240 pounds, and then, he'll explain it in a way that sounds very, very logical, but that in real life is completely impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, these are, there's a huge, huge difference between these movies and TV shows and reality. So, it's again like CSI. CSI, there'll be some security tape they'll get, and they'll be able to do a close-up, and look in somebody's eyeball in the security tape and see the reflection of the mirror, and, the curvature. That's just,
it just doesn't happen.
Unrealistic. So.
And there's been serial killers to be known to rent cars and travel to different states to commit their crime and then go back to where they live, and no one's ever the wiser.
Well, I mean, there are different kinds of serial killers. I mean, you know, there are nomadic serial killers who do travel to different, you know, places to commit their crimes. And then there are other serial killers who are kind of homebodies, who bring their victims back to their own little lairs.
Like Jeff
you know,
Dahmer.
Like, John Wayne Gacy, for example. You know, he would pick up his victims and bring them back to his suburban house and commit all his crimes there. But then you have the other kind of serial killer who just travels around the country and will commit a crime in one place and then leave town very quickly and so on. And, of course, those people are often much harder to track down.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did Gacy get caught? Wasn't it? Now, I heard a story saying he got caught because his house smelled. Is there any truth to that?
I don't think that was the case with Gacy. That has been true of other serial killers. You know, I think that finally there were people with Gacy, you know, somebody, his last victim, I can't remember if it was the parent or a friend. I think it was the parent. But somebody knew that this teenage boy had this appointment to go see Gacy, supposedly, you know, for a job interview. And, then, of course, it disappeared. So some suspicion fell on Gacy. And, of course, Gacy had some previous arrest record, and that's what finally did Gacy in.
Gotcha. Okay, so it was not the stinky basement like the rumor
No,
says.
I don't know, because I think Gacy was, living in a remote enough place that nobody detected the smell. I mean, there have been serial killers, who have been found because neighbors have suddenly complained, of some horrible odor and so on. But.
Sure. And then, of course, we have, I promised to mention this for the folks here in the Midwest, Mr. Jeff Dahmer.
Yeah,
Jeff
Dahmer. Dahmer was interesting. I mean, Dahmer was one of the very, very few serial killers I know who actually did seem to feel, after he was caught, a certain kind of remorse for his crimes. That's pretty unusual with serial killers. John Wayne Gacy is much more typical. Gacy went to his death denying he'd ever done anything wrong. Most serial killers are completely incapable of feeling sorry for the crimes they've committed.
But
Dahmer did seem to feel that.
Do you think that was an act?
I don't think so. I think it was genuine, and I think it's one of the reasons that he, when he was put into prison, he insisted on being put into the general prison population, and I think part of that was he knew that he was going to be killed, and kind of wanted to die. So I think it was probably genuine on his part. Not that I mean, that's not to in any way forgive him or anything like that, but just sort of an interesting thing with Dahmer that I think he felt himself to be a kind of monster, which most serial killers don't.
He had a moment of kind of self-realization.
Yeah.
That I'm this, and I'm sorry for what I've done, and I want to make amends to some extent.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that again. I think. I'm not even sure I'd put it that I'm sorry for what I've done. I think it's like I'm sorry for, what I am, almost.
Yeah.
Or
sorry I got caught.
Could be.
Well, I just think he knew he was a monster.
Yeah.
And wanted to end it all.
So, Harold, have you ever sat eye to eye with? I mean, have you ever interviewed any of these serial killers for yourself eye to eye, like sat across the table from them?
I have not, actually. I've avoided that. There have been a couple of cases where serial killers who have been caught and are in prison, have made efforts through intermediaries to contact me and, wanted me to write their books. And, I've made it a point to avoid that.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I don't blame you either.
I wouldn't want to do it either. I would never want to interview a serial killer. on air or any other time, quite honestly. And the BTK killer, that's another story that he seems so normal. In fact, he was a canine, or he was an animal enforcement officer in his community.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's very typical of these people. Let me just say also that, what I'm interested in as a writer are historical cases, and I'm also interested in, again, why out of all the horrific crimes that are committed, again, sadly, almost on a daily basis, again, not on the level of serial murder, but a couple of years ago, just as a kind of exercise, I would every day look through the newspapers and tear out, some horrible crime. And again, it was like every day there was some horrible crime that was committed. And, 99.9% of those, again, you might read it in the morning paper and then forget about.
Sure.
But every now and then, a certain crime will happen, a certain criminal will appear, that somehow kind of grips the imagination of the whole country. And, those people will become, like Ed Gein. I mean, they'll become almost like folk figures.
Yeah, kind of a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
And in fact,
and those are the ones I'm kind of interested in writing about, and partly I'm interested in writing about them, as a way of trying to exploring, why those criminals, what is it about their crimes that make them so compelling to the public, because again, sometimes the crimes themselves often aren't that horrendous. I mean, if you look back at something like Leopold and Loeb in the 1920s, one of the major American crimes of the 20th century, it's like, they kidnapped and killed a teenage boy, which is obviously a terrible thing, but compared to a lot of other crimes, is that horrendous?
Yeah,
but
on
there
a
was
scale.
something about them, that made that crime incredibly significant. So anyway, so the cases I tend to write about, are criminals who, again, at the time, somehow the whole country became fascinated by. So.
And in fact, I've been to that area of Wisconsin, and the Gein home no longer exists. The locals burned it down.
Yeah. Well, Gein became, this, again, he became kind of a folk figure. People told jokes about him, and, people, I've known people who grew up there who remembered, their parents telling them if they didn't behave themselves, Ed Gein would come get them at night.
Oh, that's so
those
cruel.
poor kids.
He became, this boogeyman.
Yeah, he became the, if you're not a good boy or girl, I'm going to be calling Uncle Eddie. That kind
Absolutely.
of thing. And that I know he did not. He died. What did he die in a nursing home, or was it was a mental facility, wasn't it? That Ed Gein
it was a mental facility, and he died there. And once he was arrested, he was from all accounts a very model inmate, and just spent his time reading and so on, and never showed any signs of violence and stuff. Gein was a little, Gein was not a criminal like Dahmer or Bundy or Gacy. I mean, he was not into torturing people and so on. Most of his victims, were dead to begin with.
Yeah, very true.
He did murder, as far as we know, two women, but the majority of his crimes, again, were grave robbing. So, Gein is, really kind of in a class by himself. So.
Now, where would you put the Son of Sam in all this? Would he be considered a serial killer or more of a mass murderer? Okay, a serial killer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, there's an important distinction. Mass murderers, and again, unfortunately, you see that, all too often nowadays. Mass murderers are these basically really suicidal types who, have reached somehow, the end of their rope, and they're going to basically go out with a bang.
A school gunman, for instance.
They go to some place and they kill a whole bunch of people at once, and then more often than not, either kill themselves or, arrange to be killed. What's called suicide by cop. It's basically this kind of a apocalyptic act where they're going to, people who are these desperate people, decided to end their lives, but are going to take out as many people with them as they can.
Sure.
And, very different from serial murder, again, where serial murderers, again, like Son of Sam. I mean, Son of Sam was going around shooting these young women and sometimes the men they were with, and then disappearing for a while. And then Son of Sam was, there's a kind of serial murderer that's sometimes called lovers' lane killers.
Yep,
the Zodiac killer in San Francisco is another example of that. They tend to target often couples who are like sitting in cars making out,
Yeah.
And they'll go to these places and shoot often or kill these people, and that's where they get their kicks from. So Son of Sam was one of those, again, kind of lovers' lane killers.
Okay, yeah, because I read about him in some of your works as well, and it's he got caught, of course, but he said a dog or another animal told him to do this.
Yeah.
And
to me, Son of Sam Berkowitz was, again, I mean, he was, at least borderline, seemed to be borderline psychotic at the time he was committing these crimes, because he seemed to be taking these commands to some extent from this dog.
Mm-hmm. As crazy as it sounds.
Well, he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Well, yes, he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Yes, yeah. Oh, good one. Serial killer, Cocoa Puffs. Got it. I got the joke.
Yeah. But again, the pattern of the Son of Sam crimes was typical of serial murder. Where you'd have somebody plan out these crimes and go and commit a crime, and then there would be this period where, nothing would happen, and then he'd feel this compulsion again to go out and commit another crime.
Yep.
And, this would go on for a while. Sometimes those crimes would escalate. That is, they'd become more and more frequent. But it's a very, very different phenomenon from mass murder,
and
where you'd have, somebody going postal.
And they probably have to do more extreme things to get that same level of a high.
I'm sorry, say it again?
They probably have to do more extreme things as they go to get that same level.
It becomes like anything else. It's like an addiction. And, to get that high, you start having to do it more often and more intensely. So.
Okay. It really is an
like
addiction.
A drug addiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Harold, we have about a minute and a half left. I wanted you to plug everything you're doing, where people can find you, and your next books, and all that kind of good stuff.
You can find my books on Amazon.com. I have a website, but I do have a book coming out in February, which I'm very, very proud of. It's a book called The Mad Sculptor, and it's a book about a triple murder that happened in New York City in 1937 that was committed by a very talented artist named Robert Irwin, and whose primary victim was this beautiful photographer's model. And it was a very, very sensational case at the time. The tabloids were all over it, and it led to the biggest manhunt in New York City history. So that's, as I said, it's going to be coming out in February.
Ooh, that sounds really good. I'd love to have you back on the show to talk about that.
Yeah, that'd be my pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But until next time, everybody, we got to get going. Harold, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And everybody, thank you for listening. Until next week. Next week, we will have actually Chad Lewis on the show. He is what they call a legend tripper. He goes, he's a modern-day mythbuster. Well, next week, yeah, it'll be a good one. It'll be a real good one. See you guys.
Have a good night.